I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak here, as I am also very grateful for the opportunity to have heard what I've heard here. So thank you. My title, I should have changed it before I got up here, but actually I'm not going to speak very much about Stuart Hall's writings about visual arts. I found myself when I tried to write my various first drafts that I ended up with a project that was very bookish. And I thought that was very un-Stuart Hall-like, to sort of link together these things, which he actually linked together in After the Deluge, which I recommend reading. So I wanted to, and also there came up while I was doing this, an event which changed history in a very brief and very brief manner. It changed Congress's mind, and they did two different things than they would have done if it hadn't been for the demonstration, which is a demonstration with music. So I'm working on that. I'm working on the conjuncture in Brazil, what that demonstration might mean, and also Stuart Hall's thought. My paper has 5 parts. One is about the unconsciousness of thought. The second is about the conjuncture after the generals left in 1985, and skipping over to Lula in the 2003 to 2010, and the turn to the right. So you can see it's going to be really quick here. And then the current administration, 2023 to 2026, where Lula is in a bit of a deadlock, usually. And then I discussed the demonstrations and the possible ways of thinking about what they mean, what it meant. This is, as you see, a paper more about knowing your friends than knowing your enemies, as many of these papers have been. Hall was skeptical about constructing a theoretical edifice, and at a seminar on his work in Kingston, he declared, "I would do without their theory if I could. The problem is you cannot. I cannot." He goes on, of course, to speak of how he uses theory, but I'd like to go back, suspend animation there, and go back to an early part of the testimony he gave when he talked about Henry James, whose book it was the one book besides the Bible and Shakespeare he was going to take to Desert Island on Desert Island Discs. He said, one of the things about James was, of course, his attempt to gain maximum intensity of self-consciousness, to be as self-aware as possible about the finest movements of his own conscious thinking. As he said, to be someone on whom nothing is lost. Yet to do that is to become instantly aware of the enormous unconsciousness of thinking, of thought. What brings the multiplicity of objects of Hall's thought together, without exactly unifying or uniting them, is not exactly theoretical consistency. Hall was pretty skeptical about that too. They have in common their source, their wellspring in a desiring subject. That's my thesis. For Hall, the unconsciousness of thought means there is a distance between self and identity, or in the field of his own intellectual search, the recognition that, quote, the dynamics of displacement underwrite all social relations. Familiar Stranger draws the outline of what the unconsciousness of his thought might have been. His dilemma was how to evade the pigmentocracy and disavowal of race that made his family life so very uncomfortable, and how, perhaps more enduringly, to understand what could follow the unleashing of the formidable force of the other black Jamaica. And then I continue then with a bit about a quick bird's eye view of the current conjuncture in Brazil. The new republic, which began after 1985, was followed by the Citizens' Constitution of 1988, a very progressive constitution. This constitution had its finest flowering with the election and re-election of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in 2002, re-elected in 2006. So he was there between 2003 and 2010, a time of relative prosperity. I just want to highlight some policies that were innovative and progressive and made a huge difference. The minimum income policy, which Bolsonaro was forced to continue. The new federal universities encouraging racial quotas in university entrance, and in other ways democratizing access to higher education. There was industrial policy too, with shipbuilding and a stimulus to production and consumption of cars and domestic appliances, which, as you can imagine, had its sort of a backlash or a problem to include, but it was inclusion via consumption. The backlash or the problem was that this actually jammed the streets up with so many cars that a trip that once took 40 minutes from the airport to the center of Salvador started to take at rush hour about 2.5. The demonstrations in 2013 were infiltrated and taken over by the right, and from then on there has been a surge of the right wing. But I'm skipping the part where President Dilma Rousseff, I'm sure many of you know this story, was impeached in 2016. And I refer you to From Hope to Hate by Rosana Pinheiro Machado and Lucia Muniz Calco, who did an ethnography of the poor in Porto Alegre to explain the poor's turn to the right. With the economic downturn, they say, individual self-esteem was shaken because that self-esteem was built on consumerism. There are other things at stake: organized crime, which was easy to associate with the PT government because of the enormous scandal over graft at Petrobras, and that it should be said, I must say, that the presence of organized crime is a constant. In Rio this week, it wasn't in the news as far as I could see here, but on Tuesday, Rio saw 128 deaths in a single day, only 4 of which were what the governor called the only victims, which were the police. So 120 civilians were killed in 2 complexes of favelas. Not unrelated to this was the growing power of the neo-Pentecostal churches, which presented themselves as refugees. There was also a growth in feminist movement, which was kind of silent for a while, but starting about 2015, there was influence from the internet, Slut Walk, Me Too, and growing then presence of gender dissident people and the recognition of LGBTQIA+ activists as central figures in contemporary politics as well as intellectual life and everyday life. In the face of this burgeoning of possible subject positions, there has been a reaction from the social conservatives, the churches, and the right. Most cited and most intolerable, of course, was the advances in racial equality. And that is something that deserves a special paragraph. The redemocratization in the 1980s was more or less was accompanied, or was there was a more or less effective action by the Movimento Negro, especially led by black women, to affect government policy, especially in education and human rights. There was the emergence with hip hop of a diasporic black identity, which replaced national black identity. There was a creation starting in the 1990s when the violence from the drug trade invaded all the major cities. There were creation of art education and vocational training programs, which contributed then to the flourishing of, or the entrance and the flourishing of the black first-generation students in the universities since especially 2012 when they were ruled when quotas were ruled constitutional. This access to the universities then opened the way for a generation of black artists and intellectuals to emerge from favelas and other poor communities and move into universities, museums, and other exhibition spaces. Now about Lula's deadlock with Congress. This is the secret budget. Lula was elected in 2022 by a very broad coalition of parties from center, right to left, everybody who didn't want Bolsonaro. The Congress that was elected in the first round of elections was very conservative, more so than even before, clientelistic, and closer than ever to the business of organized crime, so the press informs us. There's a constant arm wrestle between the Congress and the executive, especially the Chamber of Deputies. The Chamber of Deputies exacts concessions and lets time run out on measures that after a given time must be approved by Congress. This is because they have the right to make budget amendments, individual budget amendments, which give them money, which is practically discretionary. Since 2022, the Supreme Court ruling, it's a little bit more transparent, but it's actually money to spend as they wish with all kinds of problems of accountancy. The amount of money used this way increased from, in 2014, the election of Dilma Rousseff, it was around $1.66 billion. In 2022, at the end of Bolsonaro's time, it was 6.47, so it's quadrupled. The purpose, of course, is to sabotage the government and prevent President Lula from being reelected in 2026. President Trump sort of made that shake a bit because the economic elite really doesn't want conflict with the United States, and Lula has shown great leadership in that. But it's touch and go in 2026. Milei's election shows that. The polls didn't show that he was going to be elected. So, but at the same time, here I'm going to have to accelerate a bit. I want to give you a timeline for the demonstration before I get to the demonstration. Bolsonaro was sentenced on September 11th. Congress passed with an overwhelming majority an amendment to the Constitution which would which would prohibit any kind of trial or criminal investigation if they did not, if it was not approved by a secret ballot by their friends in Congress. This caused a considerable indignation, and the pop musicians got on board. Anitta, who's got 63 million followers on social media, came out with a statement saying, explaining what that meant in practice. And Caetano Veloso, who's this old singer from his early 80s, he was very active in the 1960s, and his wife, who's an entrepreneur, got busy calling a demonstration. This had effects, immediate effects. One is that the Senate, which had to approve this bill, this amendment, shelved it completely, unanimously. And that was on September 24th, after the demonstration of 21st. And on the 1st of October, the Chamber of Deputies approved a budget proposal that raised the ceiling on income tax. So 26.6 million taxpayers, of the poorest taxpayers don't pay tax. The shortfall will be paid by a progressive tax on 140,000 people. So that was Lula's campaign promise in 2022, and the deputies were refusing, the president of the Chamber of Deputies was refusing to put it to vote. What I want to say then about this, I'm going to skip my description of the demonstration. I want to say something about what this could mean. There's an identity discourse there. There's present, past, and future. There were these old guys on the stage singing songs that everybody knew from the 1970s. There was also sort of this repertory. There's also, to give a detour through theory, another theory, all music, according to Nina Eidsheim, is vibration. It's not notes, it's not a song, it's vibration. And it's a vibration that connects listener to emitter, no? So this explains the attraction of this that goes far beyond one of the explanations you have commonly heard. This was one of my attractions to this demonstration, was that it just was sort of sloughed off with, oh, people went to hear music, or, you know, it happens every now and then. But the key is that we have to understand, I think, how people are motivated to oppose fascism, because it's a very mixed crowd. The final song here, the last song that was sung after the band was being dragged away, unison, thousands of people on the street and on the beach singing, I'm going to celebrate. What are the words to I'm going to celebrate? The words to I'm going to celebrate are, I'm going to celebrate, you cry, I don't care, the time has come, you're going to pay me. You deserve it, you quarreled with me for no reason. I'll celebrate your suffering. You paid back with betrayal, someone who always gave you a hand. This collective celebration of victory and revenge was perhaps a displaced expression of unsought, semi-conscious, and culturally determined aspect of political and social life. I want to make a parallel between this unconsciousness of thought and this thing which burst out at the end of this demonstration. Brazilian concerts being characterized by the audience always singing along. So these were all sing-alongs. I'd also mention Derrida, Hall's use of différence, how there's an undecidable in there. There's an undecidable between who's good and who's. I mean, the desire for revenge escapes conventional morality. I do not think that Hall thought that arts were a weak discourse, and I think that that's the point that people like me in the what is often referred to as the left don't always realize, I think, or aren't able to address how this can be how this I'm in a rush, so I lost it. I'll stop there. I'm sorry, but I did at the end. I would like to bring back something which this group or the sector to which I belong often does not take into account, which is one of the vast changes in the last 15 or 20 years is the presence of Black intellectuals, of Black artists. This is something that was omitted at this demonstration, which was called by old white people with a certain admixture, but rap was missed out, and the great critical discourse in music today is rap. So there's I think a lot to think about. I'm addressing obviously an audience which doesn't exactly have to do with the sector that I inhabit in Brazil, but my interest in doing this study was to understand how those techniques of criticism, deconstruction, and talking about différence that Hall always used can help us to understand our friends. Thank you.